I'm going to call this meeting of the Elections Committee to order. Welcome, members. A quorum is present. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes to the January 25th meeting. Representative Purcell, have you had a chance to review the minutes? And would you like to move approval?
So moved.
Okay, Representative Purcell has moved approval of the minutes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. The first bill on the agenda is Representative Bahner's bill, House File 204. Representative Bahner, would you like to move that House File 204 be recommended to be placed on the general register?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. That is my movement.
Okay, thank you. And you have a DE1 amendment? Is that to put the bill in the shape you would like?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to move the DE1. It is a fairly straightforward amendment. It just adds some clarifying language to make it clear that we are actually printing the receipts.
Okay. Any discussion to the amendment? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the DE1 amendment, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the amendment is adopted. Representative Bahner, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Thank you for the opportunity to share this simple bill before you today. House File 204 allows the 59 counties across the state of Minnesota who are currently using electronic poll books to enable the electronic signature feature. Today, precincts who own the equipment use it to quickly and efficiently check in voters, reduce lines and wait times, ensure consistency by helping judges walk through the steps of the oath with the voter and receive their ballot. This bill would allow voters to use the poll pad. We do, in fact, have a sample of that here today if you'd like to see it, to enter their signature electronically rather than using a wet signature. There are a number of advantages to this electronic method. Notably, the pad allows for a much larger signing surface, as you will note in the handout supplied in your packet, allowing us to provide larger, more visible signing surface for our aging populations or those who may have visual impairments. This just makes sense. This is particularly helpful for elderly or those with disabilities. And while the pad is also able to be signed with a stylus, it can also be signed with a finger for those who may not have good grip strength, making it easier to see, easier to use, and more accessible for voters regardless of their age or ability. Signatures can be erased and re-signed if a voter makes an error or simply wishes to redo it. The technology is reliable, it produces good results, and the technology is familiar to what is commonly used today in places like your bank, Target, or the grocery store. Voters may also opt to sign the receipt with a standard wet signature if they so desire. Either path will result in a printed receipt, and that receipt is then exchanged for a ballot. The receipts are retained for the standard 22 months, along with all other election-related material in compliance with current law. Reports from the poll books will allow the election staff to have additional checks to match the number of ballots and corresponding receipts from the precinct each evening. This bill does not require any county, city, township, or precinct to purchase e-poll book equipment. It simply allows those who have the equipment to employ an electronic signature. Counties have listed this as a priority. As you will see from the letters of support in your packet, this bill enjoys support from the Minnesota Association of Counties, the League of Minnesota Cities, and the county commissioners. I do also have a sample of the poll pad again, as well as a sample in your packets that shows the difference in the size of the typical receipt that we use today versus the space that is allowed for signature tomorrow. With that, Mr. Chairs, I ask for your support, and I will turn it over to my testifiers here today.
Thank you, Representative Bahner. We do have a fair number of testifiers between the three bills, so I'm asking testifiers to keep their remarks to 2 minutes. First on the list is Kirk Peterson, and after Kirk Peterson will be Nicole Conlon. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kirk Peterson with Hennepin County. I'll be very brief. Representative Bahner did a good job of explaining it. Electronic poll books are not new to Minnesota, not new to the country. As a matter of fact, Minnesota and other states have been using them for years, but we're really not taking advantage of this technology in the way we should. We think that The benefits of having people be able to sign in on this technology really allows us to streamline the voting process, improve the efficiency in the voting places without compromising integrity or security of our voting systems. With that, I'll turn it over to Nicole Conlon with our Hennepin County Elections Department. She can actually walk through how these things actually work.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Nicole Conlon, and I'm an elections administrator at Hennepin County. I have worked with electronic rosters, also known as poll books, since our initial rollout in 2016, and I am here today in support of this bill. Electronic roster signatures would make a relatively small change in process for voters, but would lead to administrative benefits. Today, when a voter checks in or registers at a polling place, the voter must sign the voter signature certificate and election day registration application with what's known as a wet signature using a pen to paper. Using electronic signatures, the voter would be able to sign using a stylus or a finger on the tablet itself, which would print the signature on the certificate or application. Allowing for electronic signatures would minimize election judge mistakes because the poll book software walks the election judge through the check-in and registration process, ensuring that each signature is captured properly. Electronic signatures would also be a good backup in case signed paper certificates or applications become lost or destroyed. Like Representative Bahner said, most voters are familiar with signing using electronic signatures now, whether at the bank or the grocery store or checking your child out of daycare. So allowing this process at the polling place won't make Minnesota voters feel out of the norm. There are some additional accessibility benefits. A voter with less grip strength would be able to sign with a finger as opposed to being required to grip a pen. And for voters with a vision impairment, the size of the signature box is notably larger than if printed on the voter signature certificate or application, as you can see in your packets. Allowing for electronic roster signatures is not considered a new process. Of the 36 states that our electronic poll book vendor operates in, we are one of only 4 states that do not allow or require electronic signatures for their rosters. We want to join these other 30+ states in this process. There are currently
Please
59.
wrap up with 1 or 2 sentences.
Okay. Another important note is that there is no additional cost to counties for making this change. The ability to collect and retain electronic signatures is already a function available through our vendor, and the Minnesota Secretary of State also supports this bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next testifier is Max Halperin. Welcome to the committee. Max Halperin, please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Hello, I am Max Halperin, speaking as an individual election judge. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. As an election judge, I've served long enough to have started with the paper poll books and transitioned from that to the electronic. And that gives me the perspective to say that one of the underappreciated benefits of electronic poll books is that it makes sure we don't miss one of the steps in the process. We're very diligent people. We try hard to do our jobs right, and the vast majority of the time we succeed. In the old days, there wasn't anything to catch us if we were in a rush or distracted or tired at the end of the day and might accidentally skip over a step. Nowadays, we don't have that problem anymore because the electronic poll book won't advance to the next screen until you've finished your work on the current screen. So you've got to do all the steps. And the one exception to that currently is this all-critical thing of the signatures, because that's not done as a step on the poll book. That's done afterward on the paper. And, you know, the vast majority of the time it's right, but you do not want to be the one running across the gymnasium saying, hey, wait a moment. So I really appreciate Representative Bahner bringing this bill, which brings that same 100% assurance we're doing our job right to the signature step as we've already got for the rest of the process. And I'm also glad to see the DE1. It is certainly very reassuring that everyone in the polling place can see what the poll books are doing because they're printing out a paper record, and that we have that technology independent record that's then retained. So thank you, Representative Bahner, for that as well.
Thank you for your testimony, Max Halperin. I understand the Secretary of State's office is available if there are questions. Are there any members of the public who would like?
I have a question for the testifier, Mr. Chair. Is that?
Sure, I'll allow it. Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you for allowing questions, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. And thank you, Mr. Halperin, for being with us today, and thanks for your work as an election judge. It's appreciated. Could you just describe the steps that are involved here? You know, personally, I've voted by mail for the last 20 years or so, so I haven't been through the process in a polling place as such. Just describe the steps that are necessary, just so we understand better how the electronic polling book, electronic signature on the poll book actually helps the process work more smoothly.
Max
Sure.
Halperin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Torkelson. When a voter presents themselves, the first thing we do is we look in the poll book to see if they have a current up-to-date registration in that precinct. And in most precincts, they generally do. If they don't, then we go into the whole thing of confirming that they're in the right precinct and that they have appropriate proof of residence, and go through the Election Day registration process with them. If we don't have to take that detour, then we're simply going to mark them as signed in. It's already checking that they haven't voted absentee. You know, if you more than 20 years ago were voting at a polling place, there would have been the AB stamped where you would sign in to prevent you from signing in if you had voted absentee. Today, that would be on the electronic poll book, and it would literally, you know, lock us out. We can't just like sign over the top of the AB anymore. So you would mark them as having signed in, and you would verify with them that everything was right, you know, current address and so on. And once everything was verified, you know, you would click basically a done kind of button, and it would print out 2 pieces of paper. One is the certificate with the oath that, you know, swears that they're eligible, that they're going to sign. And the other is the receipt that you're going to give them, that they're going to trade for the actual ballot. And so you kind of have to hang on to the receipt and make sure they're not grabbing that right away. And you have to hang on to one end of the voter certificate to make sure they don't think that's the receipt and walk off with that to the ballot table. So you're hanging on to one end of that and presenting the other end to them and saying, sign here. And by the way, that's microscopic. I know you can't read it, but here's a large print version of it that you can read. They read that, they sign, you then withdraw it by the end you're hanging on to and hand them the receipt. But if on the other hand, they're an Election Day registrant, then it's a longer printout because it's got 2 forms. It's got a voter registration application and the certificate to sign in as a voter. And they both need to be signed off on, even though it's very nearly the same oath. One that you will be eligible, the other that you are eligible. And you have to make sure they sign both, which is an easy mistake to make, to have one signature when it should be 2 signatures. So you get that all straight, and then again, trade them for the receipt.
Thank you, Max Halperin. I'd like to just see if there's any members of the public who want to testify on this bill. Okay, all right. Other bill, I'm presuming. Okay, thank you. I'll close testimony at this point. Is there any additional member discussion? Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. A few questions. First, the sample you've given us is helpful, but I'm trying to decide what it says. Mr. Chair.
Representative Torkelson.
The signature, I'm just curious if it's somebody's signature or if it's just scribble.
It
Perhaps.
doesn't, Representative Torkelson, it doesn't look that different from my signature, but I don't know. Representative Bahner, do you have
I
a
was
brief
going to say,
response?
Mr. Chair and Lead Turkelson, perhaps they're a physician. Very possible.
Mr. Chair, perhaps they're an elections administrator at Hennepin County.
Sure, Nicole Collin.
That's my signature.
Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank the testifier for her true confession. I'll ask one more question. I think some of my other committee members have questions, but my question is in regard to security of these electronic poll books. Are they, how secure are they? Are they in any way connected outside of to the internet or other ways of sharing information?
Representative Bahner.
So first, I just want to be clear that this particular bill only pertains to the signature portion here. It does not pertain to any other aspect of the poll book, but I will actually defer to Nicole here as the expert to walk you through that piece.
Okay, Nicole Conlon.
Mr. Chair and Representative Torkelson. They are incredibly secure. All the data is encrypted before it goes onto and away from the poll book. They are only connected to the internet to receive absentee updates when we get absentee ballots in the mail or dropped off in person on election day. So that's how they get the AB stamp on, or supposed stamp onto the line, so that voters, if we receive their absentee ballot on election day, we make sure to mark them so they can't go to the polls and vote there.
Representative Torkelson.
I'm finished for the moment. I think other members have.
Sure. Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. And I bet you never thought you'd get questioned on your signature in this meeting. But I just have a question. You said you signed this with the pen or you're with your finger?
Nicole Conlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative. I signed it with a stylus.
Okay.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Nicole. Have you ever tried signing one with your finger?
Nicole Conlon.
Mr. Chair and Representative, yes. It's not as crystal clear as that stylus. It's a little bit thicker, but for the most part, it looks somewhat similar, yes.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nicole, you're amazing then, because I've tried signing stuff with my finger, like when you go to the store and buy something and you got to sign sometimes with your finger, and it comes out terrible. And so I guess that's the only, I mean, the debate here is not about whether we should use electronic poll pads. It's to do with the signature. And I just know there is a huge difference between when you sign with your finger and you sign with a stylus. There's a huge difference. There just is. And I've never had good luck signing with my finger. It looks nothing like my signature. So that, members, that's the only problem I can kind of see. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Davis. Seeing no further member comments, Representative Bahner. Oh, I'm sorry.
Chair,
Yes, Representative Torkelson.
I know you're in a hurry, Mr. Chair, but we would like to make sure we've covered
was-
everything.
Sure, there were no members on the list, but proceed, Representative
Well,
Torkelson.
thank you. I didn't know if there were other members on the list or not. So I want to thank the author for bringing this bill forward. I think it's a good bill. I think entering the modern age when it's done properly makes good sense. And I believe that, I know I'll be supporting this bill. I believe the other members of my caucus will be supporting this bill. It's a good demonstration of bipartisan support for an issue that comes before this committee, which is the way we should be operating. And I look forward to voting yes.
Thank you, Representative Torkelson. Any closing remarks, Representative Bahner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I think this is a really good advancement, and particularly for folks who may have disabilities or challenges in the poll place, being able to see that oath in larger print, to understand that you are attesting to the fact that you are who you say you are, you live where you say you live, and you are an eligible voter. Having that in a larger print can help some of our citizens really see that oath clearly and attest to that. That also is a great check and balance to the checks and balances that we've already gone through to make sure that the folks on the poll books are in fact all three of those things. But it is just one additional step to make sure that voters understand the importance of what they are doing with that ballot and making their voice heard. So I think this is a great addition to make sure that everyone follows the rules, that we have additional checks and balances in the system, and that we do it right. Thank you, members, for your support.
Thank you. With that, Representative Bahner renews the motion that House File 204 as amended be recommended to be placed on the general register. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you, Representative Bahner. Next is Representative Agbaje. Let's see. Well, I guess I don't need to welcome you to the committee since you're already on it. So Representative Agbaje, would you like to move that House File 799 be recommended to be placed on the general register?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so Representative Agbaje has moved House File 799 be placed on the general register. Please describe your bill, Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. So the bill in front of us is another bill to expand access to voting for more Minnesotans. House File 799 would allow voters to vote in person on Election Day or during the early voting period without penalty or deduction in wages to perform their civic duty. This bill ensures that should a voter choose to vote on Election Day or early in person, their employer would respect that time to vote in the same way. Voting early in person has been a useful tool for Minnesotans to be able to exercise their civic duty during a time frame that works best for them. It's useful for anyone, but especially employees who may have a deadline, a major project, or they're traveling on or around Election Day. It can also be useful for busy parents who may not be able to get to the polls on Election Day, but can find the time during the early voting period. By clarifying the language in this section of law, people know that if they go and vote early in person on a workday during the early voting period, that they won't be penalized. I hope we can all support this bill to ensure that more Minnesotans are not facing barriers to participate in our democracy through voting. I have some testifiers today, I think, so I will cede my time to them.
Thank you, Representative Agbaje. I have Beth Gendler and Sarah Lopez who have signed up to testify. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony. As I mentioned earlier, we are asking people to stick to 2 minutes.
Thanks, Chair Freiberg and members of the committee. My name is Beth Gendler. I'm the Executive Director of Jewish Community Action. JCA organizes the Minnesota Jewish community for racial and economic justice. Our Jewish community is quite diverse, but we are mostly a community of immigrants to the U.S., some first generation like me, and some who have been here for generations. Many of, if not most of us, came to this country to escape oppression and contribute to the democratic values of the American dream. We take voting seriously, and we support all measures that make voting more accessible for all eligible voters to exercise their right to contribute to a healthy democracy. There's also a very practical piece to this legislation. As the director of a small organization with just 9 staff, I personally appreciate the practical benefits that this expansion would provide. If my staff could vote at a day and time that works best for their schedule rather than being limited to Election Day, it would mean fewer interruptions, less disruption to our operations, and more flexibility for our small office.
Thank you, Beth Gendler. Next on the list is Sarah Lopez. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Hello, my name is Sarah Lopez. They're members of the Elections, Finance, and Policy Committee, Chair Freiberg and Vice Chair Greenman. My name is Sarah Lopez, and I'm the Director of Public Policy at Unidos Minnesota. Unidos Minnesota is an immigrant and New American-led statewide organization. We build power for Minnesota working families to advance social, racial, and economic justice. Additionally, I would like to share with you that I'm a naturalized citizen, and in 2015, in a room with people from all over the world, I swore an oath to the United States of America. New Americans like myself don't take our right to vote for granted, and I'm a proud member of Unidos Minnesota, where new Americans like myself participate actively in our state's democratic and civic life. And we're proud to say that our work has grown to become the largest Latinx voter engagement program in the state of Minnesota. We're thrilled to speak in support of House File 799, a bill providing the right to take the day off work to cast an early vote. Unidos is supportive of this policy because to participate in our democracy, the working people of Minnesota shouldn't have to choose between putting food on their table and participating in our electoral process. Passing this bill will allow individuals to not lose a day of work, and it reflects the growing needs of our state. Passing this bill will remove barriers for working families, working caretakers with multiple jobs, people of color, working hourly jobs with unpredictable schedules, the elderly, and the disabled. And having more days to choose from to go vote early, spread out over time, will make the ballot box more accessible, especially for rural voters. for whom getting to the polls can be very, very difficult. In specific, for us in Unidos, Minnesota, we're accountable to a statewide base of predominantly low-wage workers. Those workers are trapped in workplace segregated sectors that are more proud to unpredictable scheduling and some retaliation for taking days off. We're thrilled to speak in support of a bill aimed at building a multiracial democracy, and we're excited to make a constitutional right more accessible to all Minnesota voters. So we hope you support House File 799 by voting yes. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Would any members of the public like to testify on this bill? Sure. Please come up to the table. Yeah. And just when you start your testimony, just state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony. Sure. Yep.
Good morning, all. My name is Farah Habad. I'm a member of the New Justice Project. I organize with the New Justice Project. And I think ultimately the question of this bill just really is a question of who do we want to be as a society? Do we want to be a society that expands access and allows for the marketplace of ideas to really be challenged by the merit of arguments? Or do we want to be a society that continues to narrow the scope of who we are, who we say we want to be, and only ensure that the individuals that really are able to meet arbitrary rules are the only individuals that are able to really fully participate in the question of democracy. Ultimately, we've shown ourselves to be a state that moves with the good of the people, that expands access as much as possible. And so ultimately, when looking at this bill and looking at the expansion of the 47 days, there really are no unique disadvantages that occur with this economically, et cetera. Individuals are able to expand themselves into really being a part of this question of democracy. And so when looking at this question, ultimately, we need to ask ourselves, do we want to be a people that allow for the marketplace of ideas to truly be tested by the largest possible arguments, or do we want to be a society that constricts the question and constricts what it means to be able to have access?
Thank you for your testimony. Is there any additional members of the public who would like to speak to this bill? Okay, seeing none, we'll turn to member discussion. Representative Bliss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And according to the bill, and this is the existing law, is that you're allowed to cast a ballot and return to work on that day. Your testifier made mention of taking the day off to do it. I hope that's not part of this. And that's really the only thing I had to say.
Okay. Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Bliss. Yes, this is only for, I believe it says, the time necessary to vote. So says to be absent from work for the time necessary to appear at the employee's polling place, cast a ballot, and return to work on the day of that election or during the time period allowed for early in-person voting. So yeah, this is not about having a whole day off. If it takes you 30 minutes to vote, great. If you have a polling location that's really long and it takes you 4 hours, then it takes you 4 hours. But it's really just to accommodate the amount of time it takes to vote.
Thank you. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And election law, we need to be, precise. And reading the language on line 1.8, I think in order to be precise, after the word absent, we should add once, comma, in order to make that clear.
Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Quam. So this is language that's already in statute. We're only just adding the words on 1.9 and 1.10. Already, a voter, you can't vote multiple times. You can only vote once. The only situation where maybe that could potentially happen is if someone wanted to claw back their initial ballot prior to 7 days from before. But I don't think that I'd have to ask Secretary of State's office how often that's happening, but really this is intended for you to vote one time.
Yes, thank you, Representative Agbaje. The Secretary of State is available, I know, too.
Mr. Chair, when it was just election day, it was obviously once. But when it's the entire period, I would just think it's appropriate to make it very clear. And I think election law should be precise and make it clear and leave out ambiguity. And I think that would be appropriate. Is there a reason why the author wouldn't want to have it clear and unambiguous?
Representative Agbaje, I'm not sure it is ambiguous, but Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative. Yeah, I also don't see the language as ambiguous. I mean, partially because employers are going to be tracking when people go to vote, and so they'll know when someone has already gone to vote and likely would not approve them going to vote a second time if they've already used that time.
Representative Quam, final follow-up.
Well, I'm sorry that I'm trying to make it clear. Frankly, the original language was 1 day. We're including weeks of additional time with the additional language. And frankly, let's make it non-ambiguous. Let's be clear, because oftentimes we believe we're inferring. And this is a burden upon the worker. So, I mean, it's a real simple thing. And I don't understand why there's a resistance to make it non-ambiguous.
Thank you.
Can the chair explain to me why there's a resistance to make it non-ambiguous if it could be read ambiguous?
Well, again, thank you, Representative Quam. As I said, I'm not convinced it is ambiguous. I'd point out, too, that
Mr. Chair,
if you
isn't
let me
it
finish,
obvious?
Representative Quam,
Okay.
on the line 1.9 in the new language, it does use the word or. So they have the right to be absent from work, either on the work day of the election or during the time period for early voting. It doesn't use the word and. To me, that suggests the only once is already kind of implied in the language. It's not
Mr. Chair.
ambiguous. Representative Quam.
Before the or is a 1. After the or are multiple weeks. So you can either do it on that 1 day or on these other days. Therefore, I don't understand why there would be a resistance to making election law very clear and unambiguous. I mean, being safe is better than allowing for ambiguity.
Representative Quam, there was a period to offer amendments. As I said, I'm not convinced this language is ambiguous.
Mr. Chair, did I?
Representative Quam, final follow-up.
Mr. Chair, I never asked to make an oral technical amendment. I'm just trying to understand the intent and allow the discussion so that this bill can actually be less ambiguous. And I take a little bit of umbrage to the fact that we aren't, as members elected to this body, to try and make a bill better and try and convey a weakness or an issue. But I guess if you don't want me to speak anymore, I'll be quiet on this bill.
Thank you, Representative Quam. Yeah, I think you've made your point very clear, and I don't see this as you not having the opportunity to make your point. Representative Altendorf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative. I just had a question, with the, because we have moved now to the 46, days of absentee voting and early voting. Do you find that this is really a big concern? I know some areas have even had like weekend voting. That's a pretty long time, 46 days to be voting. Are you hearing feedback or have some sort of data showing that this is a real struggle?
Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative. I think the issue is especially as we heard from some of our testifiers, a number of low-wage workers, their schedules are very tight. And so if on election day you're scheduled to work, which is usually a Tuesday in November, it makes it hard. And so the 46 days gives you that flexibility. The 46 days, I think, was also put in place to support military members, to allow them to vote. So the purpose of this is really to give that flexibility to people and be able to use a time period that works best for them. So if they're scheduled, if they have a looser schedule on a different day that's ahead of the election, then they can take that time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Altendorf.
Just to follow up, I will vote no on this, and the reason why is I want everyone to vote, but I really believe in people, and I really believe that within a 46-day period of voting, that's ample amount of time for everyone to find adequate amount of time to vote. And sometimes as a government, we just make too many laws, and this puts a burden on employers. And so for that reason, I will vote no on this. But thank you for it.
Thank you. Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Representative, for bringing this bill. I'm a proud co-author of this bill, and as a person who ran a small business, it was really incumbent on me as the employer as well as the employee to make sure that my employees had the flexibility and ability to go vote. Being a small business, like we heard the first testifier, if we're up against a deadline, a grant deadline, to even step out for lunch or get away from my desk for lunch felt pretty difficult. And on one particular, day in November can be more challenging than, say, the day before, the week before. So my own personal experience to allow the flexibility for employers too, I think this really supports the businesses that want to do the right thing and let their people vote.
Thank you. Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Agbaje, for bringing this to us. I just have a question, and my question is based out of just, employers have rights too. And I just want to make sure that, okay, so someone goes to work and they want to go vote that morning, and the employer would say, we got a lot of work to do. The morning wouldn't be convenient. Let's let you do it in the afternoon after the lunch hour. Could that potentially be seen as the employer indirectly refusing or interfering with that person's ability to go vote?
Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Davis. No, not really. So what's already in practice with the current law, the way the law is written for like election day, say you wanted to vote in the morning, but they needed you in the morning and need you to go in the afternoon, your employer, so they can't really directly tell you what to do, but they can ask you to tell them when you're going to be off. And then if that time is inconvenient, they can also ask you to try to coordinate to minimize absences at the workplace. So that's not a right that's taken away from the employer.
Okay.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative. So what I just heard, and maybe I misunderstood what you said, is then yes, it really is all on the employee. The employee tells the employer when they're going to do it. Is that correct?
Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, it's more of a conversation. So what it's saying is the employer does have the ability to ask, right? And so I'm hoping that there's a decent relationship between employer and employee. And if the employee says, hey, I want to go in the morning, and the employer is like, no, it'd be really nice if you could go in the afternoon. Hopefully that's not too much of a burden, especially because the employer is still going to respect that time off, whether it's in the afternoon or in the morning. So it should be fine. So employers do have the ability to ask that there's coordination, that they know when people are going.
Okay, so just one more follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative. So that is what I'm hearing, is that if an employer were to say, no, you can't go vote in the morning, we'll let you go in the afternoon, and after having a discussion, then the employer is in violation of this, would be in violation of this.
Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't believe that's what I said. What I said is basically the employer-employee are going to have this conversation about when the person can go vote, but the time in general just has to be respected. So if it makes more sense and the employee agrees, then yes. But this is going to take place in the context of a conversation. The purpose is that on the day of the election or the early voting day, should this be passed, then just that time that it takes to vote would just need to be respected.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Coulter.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm glad actually that we've heard from Representative Purcell and others about sort of the employer and the employee side of it, because my comments actually more have to do more with the local elections administrator side of things. And my previous life on the Bloomington City Council worked very closely with our city clerk and our local elections administrators. And, I can tell you from what I've heard from them that typically during the early voting period, weekends can be really, really busy. They can often be just slammed with lines out the door, even in Bloomington's not by any means the largest city in the state. because that's when folks have time to go. And so from my perspective, looking at this from the dedicated public servants who administer our local elections, making it easier for them to do that, making sure that there is more opportunity for folks to go to spread that out so that our local elections administrators aren't so slammed, that they're better able to process votes during this early voting period certainly makes a lot of sense to me. And I haven't had a chance to speak with our city clerk, but I would suspect that our city clerk staff would agree. So I think this just makes a lot of sense in terms of elections administration and making it easier for everybody on sort of every side of that equation. So thank you for bringing this forward, and I'm looking forward to voting for it.
Thank you. Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think eventually I'm going to want to have the Secretary of State come down to try and kind of clarify some of this impact on employers. But in the
Maybe
meantime,
they come down now just to be ready. But proceed with your
that
questions.
would be wonderful. Thank you, Representative Agbaje, for bringing this bill forward. Currently, is there anything that prevents an employer from letting an employee go to vote during this early voting period?
Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Torkelson. According right now to the statute, it says very explicitly that it's on the day of that election. So an employer could say that, it's not election day, and so they could refuse you to go vote early.
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but that's not my question. My question is there anything that prevents an employer from letting a person go now? I'm referring to Representative Purcell's remarks earlier, where she said it'd be great if employers can let their employees go vote during this early voting period. I believe that's the case today. If I, as an employer, choose to let my employee go vote during this time period, there's nothing in law that prevents that today. Is that correct?
Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. An employer can decide that they would let someone go vote, but the protections aren't there on a day outside of Election Day. So what this does is clarifies that the protections so you wouldn't be penalized and you wouldn't have wages deducted.
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank you, Representative Agbaje, because that's the way I understand it. There's nothing today that prevents an employer from allowing employees to go vote during this time. To the Secretary of State, if I may, Mr. Chair, can you describe the consequences for employers should a complaint come forward, either under the current law as it exists or with these changes in place? How does that complaint process work, and how often has it been enacted?
Please identify yourself for the record and then respond to the question.
Mr. Chair and Representative Julie Strother with the Office of the Secretary of State. Our office doesn't have enforcement authority over this statutory section. We often get a lot of questions about this leading up to Election Day, but we don't have enforcement authority over that, and I apologize, I don't have on hand what the penalty is, if there's a specific penalty associated with it, or if it's a default penalty in statute. And
yes, thank you. I think House Research might be able to answer that.
Mr. Chair, Representative Torkelson, there's a misdemeanor penalty. Then it's directed, if there's a violation, that the county attorney of the jurisdiction would prosecute the misdemeanor crime.
Okay. Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know that we have anybody here that can inform us as to just how often this is enforced or how it's enforced, but it would be information that would be very helpful. Just one more question, I guess, Mr. Chair. Is there anything that controls how many employees can go vote at the same time? Is that if my entire staff of employees comes and says, we want to go vote right now, do I as an employer need to say, yes, you can all go? And or does the employer have some control over how this process works within the workplace?
Representative Agbaje or Julie Strother?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Torkelson. Again, according to this fact sheet that was actually put out by the Secretary of State's office, your employer can ask that you tell them when you will be gone and ask that employees coordinate their absences to minimize workplace disruptions. So that an employer can ask for that.
Okay. Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that information. Mr. Chair, there are certainly some further questions and some misgivings about this particular bill. While We certainly all support everyone having the chance to vote. We're not, I believe I'm not sure that this is completely ready for prime time. So I will be voting no this morning, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Torkelson. Any closing remarks, Representative Agbaje?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I urge that, you think about ways that we're continuing to expand access to the ballot box. We already have a long early voting period. We, have mail-in voting, and all this would do is just continue to clarify that you would have that protection to go vote early without having your pay deducted or any other penalizations for you at work if you go to vote during a workday during the early voting period. So thank you, and I look forward to your support.
With that, Representative Agbaje renews her motion that House File 799 be recommended to be placed on the general register. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Representative Agbaje. Members, Vice Chair Greenman is presenting a bill in another committee, so I've asked Representative Stevenson to chair this portion of the committee since I'll be presenting the bill. So if you could, with your indulgence, if you could just give me one moment.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Representative Quam?
Before you go, I'm curious why there's anonymous testimony in our packet. I thought policy SOP was to have it listed on each piece that's given to us who generated it.
I apologize, Representative Quam, it was an oversight. We do frequently get, requests from people to hand out materials to members. So, and we try to accommodate that as much as possible. In this case, that was an oversight, so I apologize.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So what you're saying is staff is now notified that standard operating procedure is not to include anonymous materials in our packet.
Yes, that is our intention.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Where's that part of another one? Oh, I thought that was part of this.
Chair Freiberg, when you are situated, if you want to move your bill.
Sure, thank you. I will move House File 642 be recommended to be placed on the general register.
Chair Freiberg moves House File 642 be recommended to be placed in the general register. Chair Freiberg, to your bill.
Thank you. So this bill's been around for a while. Many of you have heard of it. It's the National Popular Vote Compact Bill. And I support this bill because I believe the president should be elected in a system where every vote is equal, every vote matters in every state, in every election, and the candidate with the most votes goes to the White House. I believe a voter in Minnesota should matter exactly as much as a voter in every other voter in the country, no matter if they live in Golden Valley, in Pennington, in Chicago, in Anchorage, or in Hope, Arkansas. The Constitution's clear that states control the Electoral College, and not all states award all electoral votes to the popular vote winner in that state. In Nebraska and Maine, for example, state law awards electors based on the outcome in each congressional district. Twice in our lifetimes, the second place candidate has gone to the White House. In our history, the second place candidate has won 5 times, and 5 out of 46 presidents is not a very good track record. Electing the second place candidate erodes faith in our elections and sends the wrong message at a time when our democracy is under attack. Further, in every presidential election, we see an intense focus on the so-called battleground states, while 70 to 80% of the country is left on the sidelines and taken for granted. In our country, there are over 500,000 elected officials, but there's only one who can take office without getting more votes than their opponent. Only one can take office while regularly ignoring 70% of their voters. But states have the power to make this change, and I hope Minnesota will join the 15 states and the District of Columbia that have already passed this bill. These states have 195 electoral votes of the 270 required for the proposal to take effect. It has passed one chamber or another in 9 additional states with 88 electoral votes, more than the 75 required to deliver a national popular vote for president. Now, over the years, I've heard from voters and colleagues from all parties that we need to extend the principle of one person, one vote to presidential elections. We did something along these lines in 1913 with U.S. Senate elections with the ratification of the 17th Amendment. And I've not heard from people who want to go back to the days of state legislatures electing U.S. senators. I'm proud to back this bipartisan reform that would be good for the country. When it came up for a vote in our chamber in 2013, there were 20 GOP members who voted for it. Passing national popular vote gives us the chance to do our part to strengthen our democratic process, restore some faith in our elections, advance equality, and move the country to a popular vote for president. Joining me to testify today are several people who also support the national popular vote bill. Some are citizens who want to see their vote count, and some are experts on the history and details of how this law works. And our Secretary of State, Steve Simon, is here. In 2007, as a member of the House, then Representative Simon was the first person to introduce the national popular vote bill. This bill has been around for a long time, and I hope 2023 is the year we finally send it to the governor. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the testifiers.
Thank you, Chair Freiberg. We do have a number of testifiers who signed up to testify today. In an interest to accommodate them all, we will be limiting testimony to 2 minutes. Mr. Brown will be keeping track of time, and when time expires, I'll be asking testifiers to wrap up comments briefly. The first testifier is Patrick Rosensteel. Mr. Rosensteel, if you'd state your name for the record to make sure I got right. And then
sure, you did great, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Patrick Rosensteel. I'm senior consultant to National Popular Vote. Sort of bring a conservative voice of reform to the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, lifetime Republican if we registered in this state, but I support the reform because I believe every voter in every state should be politically relevant in every presidential election. I think I want to stick to the mechanics of the bill a little bit so we understand the conversation we're having. The National Popular Vote Interstate Compact leverages 2 clauses in the United States Constitution. One is Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution that I don't need any theory around. I can read what they wrote in the document, which is each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors. So the National Popular Vote Interstate Compacts ask the various state legislatures if they prefer to use that power to ensure that the candidate with the most popular votes is elected president. The other power it leverages is the power of the state to form agreements amongst themselves, right? Interstate compacts. Minnesota's in a lot of these. The Great Lakes compacts. Article 1, Section 10 allows states to form agreements amongst themselves. You know, that power has been strengthened by conservative courts over time. There's not much question about whether or not states can form agreements amongst themselves. You know, and National Popular Vote leverages that power under Article 1, Section 10. What the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact says is when states with 270 or more electoral votes say we're going to have a national popular vote for president, we're going to have a national popular vote for president because the compacting states agree in the 888 words of this compact you can read. The compacting states agree that they're going to award all 270 electoral votes to the party of the candidate who wins the most popular votes in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. So 270 electoral votes is a majority of the Electoral College, 270 of 538, right? And it's going to guarantee the presidency to the candidate who has the message of resonance to the most American voters.
Thank you, sir. If you could conclude your testimony.
Absolutely. I urge support and adoption. Every voter in every state should be politically relevant in every presidential election. If you support a national popular vote for president, this bill is for you. Thanks for your time.
The next testifier is our wonderful Secretary of State, Steve Simon. Secretary Simon. Welcome back to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Steve Simon, Minnesota Secretary of State. This comes down to me to one central principle, and that is that in the world's greatest democracy, the second place vote getter should never be President of the United States. This bill has a long history of bipartisan support in this body. You heard before about what happened several years ago, but authors, not even people who have voted for it, authors have included Representative Garofalo, former Representative Hamilton, former Speaker of the House, Kurt Zellers, and over in the Senate at one point, one of the authors, and you know they only limit authors to 5 over in that body, one of the authors was the then GOP Senate leader, Dick Day. So this bill, as you've heard, would use the Electoral College, use it, not get rid of it. This isn't contravening the Constitution. This is using the Constitution, using the machinery of the Electoral College to ensure that the outcome always means that the top vote getter wins the presidency of the United States. And the Constitution, as you heard, is clear. The Electoral College is basically a point system. It goes by a fancy name, but it's a point system. The more people you have, the more points you get. The fewer people you have, the fewer points you get. Minnesota has 10 points, 10 electoral votes. And under the Constitution, it's very explicit and clear. The framers, the founders, they knew what they were doing. They were explicit. They said, states, you can allocate them any way you wish, any way you wish. It just so happens that 48 states have decided, and it is a choice. It's not in the Constitution. States can allocate them any way. They have decided, Minnesota among them, to do winner take all. If you win Minnesota by 1 vote, you get all 10 of our points, our electoral votes. If Minnesota wanted to do, or any state wanted to do something goofy, like say that the tallest candidate will get our electoral votes, or the candidate with the most letters in their last name would get our electoral votes, that's a bad idea, but the Constitution would allow that. Here, we are asking that the legislature make a choice, the choice that makes the most sense for the American people, which is that as in every other office under the sun everywhere in the United States, the person with the most votes wins. And that's the real concept. And I really ask members, I mean, how can we say to a child in Afghanistan or Iraq or Germany or Canada or Brazil or anywhere that we are the world's premier democracy, a constitutional republic, and yet, not infrequently, the person who gets second place in the vote total becomes not only President of the United States, but the most powerful person on the planet Earth. It's untenable. We can no longer do it. I can tell you as Secretary of State, from an administrative standpoint, this works very well. It's absolutely doable. It could be implemented quite easily in Minnesota and in other states, and I ask for your support.
Thank you, Secretary Simon. The next testifier is David Fisher from Clean Elections Minnesota, will be followed by Manilyn Hoole. Mr. Fisher.
Mr. Chair, I was going to say Chair Freiberg, but he's right here. My name is David Fisher. I teach at the University of Minnesota Law School, serve on the board of MNsure, and I'm a former Minnesota Commissioner of Administration. I'm here on behalf of Clean Elections Minnesota in support of House File 642. Our Electoral College has elected candidates who lost the national vote, popular vote 5 times in our nation's history, and we've had 2 near misses, as Chair Freiberg has indicated. It defies Lincoln's Gettysburg Address for government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And the system, as stated earlier, encourages presidential campaigns to focus on a limited set of swing states where small changes in the popular vote can produce large changes in the Electoral College vote. A study by Fair Vote shows that in 2004, candidates confined 3/4 of their peak season campaign resources to just 5 states. And while the other 45 states received little attention, and 18 states received no candidate visits and no TV advertising. In effect, the Electoral College system disenfranchised up to 3 million voters in 2016 and almost did so again in 2020 for over 7 million voters because their votes were not relevant in the Electoral College count. It's a fundamental principle of representative government of a republic that ultimate power is held by the people who alone select their representatives. And it's enshrined in our Constitution as the very purpose of our decennial census, to each person, 1 vote. And it also establishes that each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct its electors. So we have enough in this compact now to represent over 72% of the electoral votes needed to elect presidents. Let's add Minnesota to that tally. For these reasons, I urge the committee to support House File 642 and instill integrity to our presidential electoral process. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Manilyn Hoole, will be followed by Cindy Holker. Mr. Hoole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Manilyn Hoole, and I am a citizen in Minneapolis, but I'm also an enrolled member of Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. And I'm here just to share some of my thoughts on why I support this bill. As a young Native American, it is incumbent upon me when I think about what does it mean to vote every single election. My ancestors signed into treaties with the United States government under trust. Trust that our land and our people would be protected by the United States government and that we would participate fully in our democracy. We weren't actually guaranteed that right until the 1960s. Today, when we vote, one person, one vote is the great equalizer in our nation. As a Native American who grew up in foster care and has experienced various times where I didn't feel like I could accomplish different things, when I go to that ballot box and I know my vote is counted, just like anybody else in this country, I know I can make a difference. I know that my life is in my own hands. Our future and our destiny is taken upon ourselves. When we go into the popular vote, that's exactly what we're doing to every single American. So I really do urge you to think about that message, to send it to young people who feel as if the system doesn't work. That why engage in a system where second place could win, right? We don't let that happen anywhere else. So take that into consideration as you vote today, and I really urge you to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hool, and my apologies for mispronouncing your name.
No worries, no worries.
Next, we have Cindy Holker. It'll be followed by Chris Pearson. Ms. Holker?
Thanks. My name is Cindy Holker, League of Women Voters Minnesota member and vice president of my local league in South Tonka. Thank you, Representative Stevens and committee members, for this opportunity to speak in support of HF 642. The League of Women Voters will be 103 years old in February, and our members of all genders are proud to be nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties at any level of government, but always working on behalf of all voters toward a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. I want to preface my comments by stating that the League of Women Voters US believes in representative government. The League specifically supports electoral systems that elect policy-making bodies that proportionally reflect the people they represent. We believe the National Popular Vote Compact is simply another important course correction within our electoral system, one of dozens we've had throughout our history as we've learned how to better ensure that our government represents all the people. This has included legislation such as the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the Bipartisan Help America Vote Act, HAVA, in 2002. The people of Minnesota have consistently worked to learn and update our laws as needed in order to ensure that voters are able to freely cast their ballot, to have their ballots counted accurately, and most importantly, to protect the confidence of voters that their votes and their voices matter. Just like a healthy economy depends on strong consumer confidence, so does a healthy electoral system count on strong voter confidence. And when a majority of votes cast actually means you lose, that significantly undermines voter confidence and participation. Minnesota has a real opportunity through the National Popular Vote Compact to ensure that our presidential elections reflect the voices of all the people while still maintaining the integrity of our current election system. The League of Women Voters urges a yes vote on this bill. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. The next, we have State Senator Chris Pearson. I think I omitted your title before. I apologize for that. Thank you for joining us today. Come forward and proceed your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. It's a former state senator as of a month ago. I did enjoy an honor to serve 3 terms in the Vermont Senate and 5 terms in the House before that. I'm here in support of National Popular Vote on behalf of National Popular Vote. It's been my day job for a long time. I just want to review a little bit of the history because oftentimes we think of the Electoral College as one thing. But as you've heard, it is in fact up to states, entirely up to states of how it operates. So we're used to that red-blue map. That is the current interpretation. That is states using the winner-take-all rule. Winner-take-all is not mentioned in the Constitution. It was in fact only used by 3 states in the very first presidential election. They all went on to repeal it. For several decades, states were trying all sorts of different solutions to use their power in ways to benefit presumably their own state interests. So I just want to ground us in the fact that it is not locked in. Here you have before you an opportunity to bring the Electoral College into sort of a more modern idea of every vote being equal and guaranteeing every voter in every state a meaningful voice and guaranteeing the candidate with the most votes wins. Those are hard pieces to argue against, and so our opponents come up with oftentimes, and I'm sure you'll hear today if you haven't already, you'll hear ideas like, there's no official count. What would we do? National Body vote's a nice idea, but there's no official count, and so this will leave states in a vulnerable, potentially a constitutional crisis. Of course, there's 50 official counts, and the compact depends on states' final determination. So Secretary Simon would not be in a place to judge another state's final counts. He would simply take that final document. I also want to say quickly that there's a lot of focus on the battleground states, right? The winner-take-all system means that candidates focus on, as it happens, 12 battleground states to the exclusion of 70+% of voters. That's not just a campaign. We can look at campaign metrics of ad spending and campaign events, but also policy coming out of the White House. Battleground states enjoy more No Child Left Behind waivers, more disaster declarations. They get more money and they get it faster. They enjoy things like more ventilators in the heart of COVID. The White House is understandably looking at either getting reelected or preserving the office for their party, and therefore favors the 12 states that will effectively determine the outcome.
Mr. Pearson, if you conclude your testimony.
I have concluded, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I urge support for this and look forward to your debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Next, we have Jean Massey and then Sean Parnell.
Greetings, members of the committee and Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and thank you, Representative Freiberg, for bringing the National Popular Vote bill for discussion. I'm a personal proponent, and Fair Vote Minnesota is a proponent of this reform, and I'm here today not to talk about what you normally know me for, which is to advocate for ranked choice voting, and I look forward to the opportunity to be before you soon to discuss that issue. But I do want to clarify today that there is the complete compatibility with the national popular vote and ranked choice voting when the two coincide to elect the President of the United States here in Minnesota. There has been confusion created around that issue by opponents of both ranked choice voting and the national popular vote, and whatever statutes need to be clarified in order to make sure that the two are compatible when in use together, that will be happening in Minnesota, just like it has happened in Maine. Maine uses ranked choice voting for the election of president, and it has clarified its statutes to be in compliance so the two can work together, and that's how it would be in Minnesota. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear to people, and that would not be a problem because we hope both bills will advance this session. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Massey. Our last testifier that signed up is Sean Parnell. Mr. Parnell.
Thank you. My name is Sean Parnell. I'm with People for Opportunity. I'm here to testify against the National Popular Vote Compact. We've already sort of heard about the question raised of ranked choice voting and national popular vote. Are these two things compatible? I am one of the people who's been saying for quite a while now that they are not compatible. The reason is because the compact assumes that every state uses a plurality voting system where there's a single vote total for every candidate. Under ranked choice voting, of course, there are at least two vote totals. There's the initial vote total, and then the ranking process takes place, and then there's the final result. The fact is that the compact provides no guidance on which vote total is to be used. I've heard about the Maine legislation that supposedly fixes this. 2 points. One, the Maine legislation doesn't actually fix the problem. what it does is it specifies that on the state's certificate of ascertainment, it will be the final vote total that is used. However, what that ignores is that the certificate of ascertainment is not the only official statement that Maine, or any of the other states for that matter, will produce as part of their presidential vote counting process. I actually have copies with me of the document that the Secretary of State in Maine used in the most recent congressional race in the 2nd District that used ranked choice voting to determine the outcome. And sure enough, it includes the first round votes and the final round votes. And I'm not the only one that has identified this as a problem. Actually, I know that the Fair Vote people believe that the Maine Maine legislation has solved this. However, Rob Ritchie, who is the head of Fair Vote, the national organization, actually produced a about 65-page paper in 2021, basically laying out the same problems that I have identified and suggesting that the solution to this is one, federal legislation that would force every state to use a ranked choice ballot in their presidential elections. I'll just say that seems politically difficult and constitutionally dubious, and I'd be happy to explain why later in the question and answer period. And the other solution that he proposes is a second interstate compact that states that use ranked choice voting could use.
And Mr. Parnell, I'll have to ask you to conclude your testimony.
All right. I will just conclude by saying there is no official national popular vote count. There are 51 official state vote counts that National Popular Vote attempts to cobble together, despite the fact that these votes have been cast, counted, potentially recounted, and reported in different ways. And that is going to lead to significant chaos and problems.
Thank you, sir. There was no additional people who signed up. You can step down, Mr. Parnell. Thank you. Is anyone in the audience wishing to testify? Yes, sir. If you could make your way to the podium, state your name for the record, and then proceed to your testimony. And again, you will have 2 minutes like everybody else has had 2 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Mark Bonhorst. I understand that I submitted some written testimony late. I understand you have that electronically, or will have it electronically. You may not have it in hard copy. I want to talk, I'm not going to go into the details of that. I want to address 3 issues, or mention 3 issues on the question of sort of partisanship and trying to overcome the partisan divide around this issue. I'm a strong proponent of the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. I agree with what's been said today by the proponents today. I'm also a strong proponent of both and. I think we should think seriously about constitutional amendments and try to find constitutional amendments where we can have broad bipartisan agreement. The first would be a constitutional amendment in the state of Minnesota saying the people shall elect the electors. Certainly that's something everybody can agree to, and it's a direct refutation and rejection of this really pernicious independent state legislature doctrine. I have been working in this area for 6-7 years. I'm a retired public sector attorney. I've become an author. I wrote a law review article, first author on a law review article in 2022, Presidential Election Reform, a National Imperative, another article forthcoming in the Mitchell-Hamlin Law Review, Gaping Gaps in the Independent State Legislature Doctrine History. And I'm working on an article right now with Michael Fitzgerald, the nation's leading historian on Reconstruction in Alabama, let me give you the title of that. He came up with such a great title. Golden Opportunity Lost, the Electoral College, Racial Terror, and Reconstruction. The Electoral College reform that nobody knows anything about was a constitutional amendment which was introduced on January 28, 1869, and passed the Senate by a 2/3 vote on February 9th, 1869.
And I'll have to ask you to conclude your testimony.
Okay. I discussed that further. It was wildly popular in the nation's most bitterly divided era, and I think it deserves a careful look by this committee and by our representatives in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you for coming to testify. And as you noted, your submission is available electronically. It's been posted on the committee's website for if members are looking for that. Are there any other members of the public wishing to testify? Seeing none, we'll move to member discussion and questions. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to clarify a few points that were brought up, discussion of the 2013 vote on this bill, a bipartisan majority, including members of leadership of the majority, voted against. And obviously, we have the bill now, so it failed. We're a democratic republic. We were founded by the states and empowered and also limited by the Constitution. And the idea when we were founded is to protect the small states from the large states and add some balance. That's why there's a Senate, and that's why we've got the Electoral College. With the current system, Minnesota has a 5% greater influence on the presidency than if we did NPV. But the core issue I have is that Minnesota voters, citizens of our state, their voice is in their vote. So the decision of how to allocate our Electoral College votes should only be decided by the citizens of the state. To dilute it, to diminish it, is to decrease the voice and the power invested in our citizens. And that is why I have concerns about this. And frankly, every vote should be equal in our state because we are a nation of the states. We are empowered federally, but we are empowered by the state constitution and our state to do what we feel is best for Minnesotans. And through the Electoral College, we have a greater voice in the national political activity. And, you know, frankly, it gives us a feeling, even if we don't win, we were heard. But if we do NPV, if we don't win, I don't think we've really been fully heard. Not to the weight that this nation and the Constitution set up to do. And so I'm very disappointed that we would consider weakening the voice of our people. The argument about, well, presidential, we're ignored because we're a small. No, actually, the last two presidential election campaigns, we had a lot of attention in Minnesota, much more attention than the flyover status that we're hinted at. And I trust our state. I'm not familiar enough that there couldn't be other things happening in other states. In fact, the Supreme Court decision in 2008, Crawford v. Marion, 6-3 decision. Justice Stevens wrote the majority. And in that case, it was stated that there were sufficient historic and current evidence that there is some voter fraud. So the Supreme Court says there's that possibility. And this was in another state. And we don't control the other states. We've heard a lot of silly things about, oh, the tallest person could get our, well, if he gets the votes, then he gets our Electoral College. But we have a Constitution. In it, we've got civil rights. And I think it's very superfluous to throw out silly what-ifs, because that's not reality. Let's stick to the reality. And that is our voters and our people deserve to choose our electors, not anyone outside our state boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Quam. Representative Bliss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions are for the gentleman, Sean, I believe it is. Can you come down here? And I'll state in observe some time, I'll state some questions on your way down. We heard a couple of times from a few different testifiers that we shouldn't be electing people that come in second place. In ranked choice voting, is it uncommon for the second place person on the initial vote to actually win in ranked choice?
That's
Mr.
actually,
Parnell.
oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, Representative. That's probably actually a better question for somebody who's more familiar than I am with the history of ranked choice voting.
Representative Freiberg, should have an answer to that question.
Yeah, well, I guess I just wanted to kind of frame this debate. I'm a little surprised by all the discussion we've already had about ranked choice voting. We don't have a system of ranked choice voting currently for president or any statewide office in Minnesota. I presume there's going to be a bill at some point to do that, and when the legislature, I'm sure, will have a discussion about that, but at this point, I haven't seen that. So all of this discussion seems rather speculative.
Yeah, I hope members can keep discussion to the
Thank you,
bill.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Bliss.
To the author, then, are there other states that are in the compact? Do they have ranked choice voting?
Representative Freiberg.
I don't know the answer to that offhand.
I do. May I?
Mr. Parnell, yes, go ahead.
Currently, no. However, that's not the relevant question. The relevant question is, will any state use ranked choice voting in the presidential process? Because, again, the idea of national popular vote is that your Secretary of State is going to go out and obtain vote totals from all of the other states, including, obviously, the two states, Alaska and Maine, that will be using ranked choice voting. And when they do, they are going to have a choice to make. Do they accept the final vote totals on that ranked choice voting, from that ranked choice voting process, or do they accept the initial vote totals? That's a choice, and because depending on the state, depending on the circumstances, those numbers can differ by tens or even hundreds of thousands of votes. If you have a close national election, by my count, 4 of the last 16 have been close, you potentially could be deciding the election based on which choice is made.
Thank you, Mr. Parnell. Representative Bliss.
Thank you. One follow-up. I've got several, but in the interest of time, I'm going to make a statement first that we are a nation of 50 independent states. The founders, in their infinite wisdom, did tell the states that they could divide their electors. And what I find baffling is that we're really trying to find ways around the intent of the Constitution now. And we as a state deserve our laws and our people voting according to our laws. California may have different laws than we do, different people voting. There's a push now for undocumented immigrants to have voting in some states. Are we going to allow them to help Minnesotans choose who our electors go to? There's potentially, this would never happen, but there's a potential of a rogue Secretary of State making immigration or election laws outside of the legislature. I know that would never happen, but it's a possibility. And we would then be required to, if that was in another state, we'd be required to go by that state's rules and count their votes to align or to assign the Minnesota electors. And I find that it's just baffling again. And I guess I don't really have a question. I mean, that was pretty much it. There was other statements that are outrageous that were made. I could go on and on and on, but I know there's other questions.
Okay, thank you. You can step down, Mr. Parnell. Okay. The next question, I'm sorry, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Freiberg, who do our electors here in Minnesota represent?
Chair Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Davis. I'm not sure I understand the question. The electors, the way it's worked, they're people chosen by the two political parties, and there's two slates of them. This bill proposes another way to allocate electors.
Representative Davis.
Well, but they represent Minnesota, correct?
Chair Freiberg.
Yes.
Representative Davis.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Freiberg. So, let's say Secretary of State Steve Simon decides to run for president. And if you can look at the last election, he's very popular in Minnesota. He won by 10 points. And let's say he blows it out of the water in Minnesota and wins it by 20 points. My understanding is, according to this, if we pass this, he doesn't get elected by national popular vote, but he does overwhelmingly win the votes in Minnesota by 20 points. We're going to then take our representation and give it to the national popular vote winner. Am I understanding that correctly?
Allow me to be the first to endorse Secretary Simon in his 2028 bid. Chair Freiberg.
Thank you, Representative Davis. If Secretary of Simon wins Minnesota by 20 points, but loses the national popular vote, and this passes, he would not get it. If we pass this, this is the Minnesota legislature stating Minnesota's preference is for the person with the most votes to be elected president. And I think that's a principle everyone understands, from the youngest child to people in other countries, and it's something that I support as well. We've had 5 elections where the person getting fewer votes does not become president, and that is very difficult to explain. This would follow the practice for every other elective office in the land.
Representative Davis, do you have
Yep, just
one more follow?
One more. Yep.
Representative.
Thank you. And thank you, Representative Freiberg. This is why I will be voting no, because the states are to be a voice by themselves. And that's what the founders intended. And I do see the wisdom in that. We as Minnesota are a voice alone from the rest of the states. And that is why I'm a no vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Davis. We do have 2 more members. We can go over a few minutes. I'm guessing Representative Driscoll will be the 3rd member, but we'll go to, I'm sorry. I'm just out of practice, Representative Torkelson. Excuse me. But Representative Coulter.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do support this bill. I want to be clear about that from the beginning. And I think to start off, we need to sort of ground ourselves in the real conversation here. And Mr. Rosenstiel has a much stronger memory than I do. He was able to recite it verbatim, but just in case, because I'm a nerd like that, I have my copy of the U.S. Constitution that I bought in college and hasn't changed since then. But I think it's worth repeating that when it discusses how the president becomes the president, it says each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors. So we can talk about what the founders intended, but we know what they said, what they actually wrote in the Constitution that has been ratified by the states. And the founders said that the legislature can make their own determination about how electors are chosen. And we've heard, obviously, and we know that other states have made different determinations, not only over history, but right now. Different states have made different determinations. And so this idea that this is an end run around the Constitution or something other than what the founders intended is, I think, highly, highly dubious. But I think Representative Freiberg really made the correct point from the beginning and just now, that at the end of the day, this is about fairness. And certainly, I appreciate that compared to other states, Minnesota has a larger voice in our presidential elections. That, like it or not, I mean, they're set up as 51 independent elections, but they're really national elections. Let's not kid ourselves about the reality here. But that's not when we're talking about a national election, it is not fair that Minnesota has a larger voice. And to sort of take this a step further, I actually really appreciated Secretary Simon's point system analogy because it parallels with the math that I did this morning. In the 2020 elections, if we're talking about this as a point system, it took roughly 328,000 Minnesotans to score 1 point, Minnesota voters to score 1 point. It took roughly 168,000 voters in Delaware to score 1 point, and 122,000 voters in Vermont. Now, Mr. Pearson's a nice guy. We had a great conversation in my office, but I don't think his vote should count more than twice for what mine does. And say what you will about, Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden, I don't think their votes should count more than mine does in a national election. And that's what this is about fairness and making sure that every vote really does count the same, so that voters in North Dakota and Iowa and Wisconsin and Minnesota, that every vote counts the same. And that's what this does. And so that's why I support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Bahner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Chair Freiberg, for bringing this forward. And I really do agree with my colleague, and that this really is about basic fairness. This is about voter confidence. There was a question either about subverting the intent of the Constitution, but the Constitution, the core principle of the Constitution is that it shall be a government for the people, by the people. That is the core tenet of the Constitution. And when we talk about this, no one believes that the person with less goals or less touchdowns should win the game. There is literally no one who believes that. Not even a child, as Chair Freiberg believes, that the person who it comes in second place wins the game. No one believes that. No one with common sense. Your voice is in your vote. It should only be decided by the people within every state. I'm quoting one of our members here today. Every vote should be equal. We just heard, under the current system, they are not equal. That is not fair. That is not transparent. That is not for the people, by the people, period. If I live in a blue state and I'm a conservative, but I'm voting for the President of the United States, I want my vote to matter just as much as anybody else in every state. If I'm a progressive in a red state, I want my vote for my president to count just as much as everyone else. The president does not govern, by the way, just so we're clear, the people of only Minnesota. The president governs every citizen of the United States of America collectively. And one of our testifiers said, the people alone should elect their representative. That is exactly the core principle we are talking about here today. And for that reason, I will be an emphatic yes on this particular vote. Thank you, Chair Freiberg.
Representative Torkelson.
Mr. Chair, I have a number of questions about this bill. It's complicated. The effect on this state is complicated. The effect on the country is complicated. I'm already late for an appointment. I move to table this bill.
There's a motion to table the bill. The motion is not debatable. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion does not prevail. Bill is not tabled. Representative Torkelson. There's been an ask for division. All those in favor of tabling the bill, please raise your hand. Opposed? There's 7 nays and 5 ayes. The motion is not adopted. Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will then attempt to get my questions answered. I don't think there's adequate time unless we're going to go till noon, but if that's the case, we will.
We have the room until 10:10.
That's soon. First, regarding ranked choice voting, I would like to have a better understanding of what's happened in Maine with ranked choice voting. We know that ranked choice voting is not part of this bill, but we also know that there is ranked choice voting being considered as a bill for the state of Minnesota. And, I have to confess, Mr. Chair, that I believe I did vote in favor of this in 2013. But in 2013, ranked choice voting was not, to my knowledge anyway, was not available in any state across this nation. I'm a little bit interested in Mr. Steve Simon's, Secretary of State's idea of the longest name getting the most votes, because I have a pretty long name, Mr. Chair, but then Representative Zalesnikar got elected, and it kind of messed that all up. So sorry about that. But I would like Mr. Parnell to come back to the stand and inform me a little more about how ranked choice voting in Maine they've tried to address it by passing some state laws that I have not had time to review. to try and make the Maine system fit into a possible national popular vote system. But we also have Alaska that has ranked choice voting, and they have made no efforts, in my understanding, to adjust their system so that it somehow fits into this very complex arrangement.
Well, Representative Torkelson, I will note that neither Maine nor Alaska has adopted the National Popular Vote Compact. You're free to use the time between now and 10:10 for whatever questions you want, but perhaps I would suggest that questions related to ranked choice voting might be better served when we have the ranked choice voting bill in front of you. Would you like me to direct the question still to Mr. Parnell?
I would, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Parnell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative. As I stated earlier, the question isn't whether states in the compact use ranked choice voting. The question is, will states that are in the compact have to go and obtain vote totals from states that use ranked choice voting? And the answer is clearly yes. I mean, that's the point of national popular vote, that you collect vote totals from every single state, those that use plurality voting and those that use ranked choice voting or some other method. So the question of ranked choice voting is very relevant, regardless of whether Minnesota has ranked choice voting or whether any states in the compact use it. What Maine said in their legislation is that the numbers reported on the certificate of ascertainment will be the final vote totals. Now, one of the problems, and this is actually something that National Popular Vote, at least the chair of National Popular Vote, has acknowledged, although he doesn't think it's a problem, is that if you have a situation where there's an independent or a third-party candidate who finishes ahead of a major party candidate, the Democrat or the Republican, then that third-place candidate, that Republican or Democrat, will, in the final rankings, have 0 votes reported out of that state on that certificate of ascertainment. That's how ranked choice voting works. You've only got 2 candidates standing in the end. If the Republican or the Democrat finishes in third, the American public will watch as literally hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of votes are erased from the national vote total. I think that is going to be quite controversial if and when that happens. But as far as what Maine did, they ostensibly fixed this issue by saying that it will be only the final vote totals on the certificate of ascertainment, but what they ignored, and they really can't fix it, is that there are other documents available that your Secretary of State and every other Secretary of State may also obtain vote totals from. Typically, the state canvass or the statewide certified results. Every state calls it something a little bit different, but they all have some sort of statewide canvass that says, here are the vote totals for all of the candidates. And I actually have here both the Maine and the Alaska certified vote totals, and sure enough, it has the initial vote totals and the final vote totals.
I'm going to ask you to pause, Mr. Parnell, just because there's 3 minutes left. I want to make sure that if Representative Torkelson wants to make closing comments or ask a different question, he has the opportunity to do so. We can have Mr. Parnell continue, but I just wanted to give you the opportunity.
I actually think I've finished explaining that part.
Thank you, Mr. Parnell. Representative Torkelson.
Well, Mr. Chair, I can't help but note that in a discussion in another committee regarding a different issue, a representative asked for more time because he felt the issue had not been fully discussed and there was a need to delay. This has to do with a certain decision regarding the merger of hospitals because more information was needed. And he felt that moving too quickly was a disservice to the body and to the committee. I feel the same way here, Mr. Chair. We're moving much more quickly than we've had time to digest. There's new information in our packets that I have not had a chance to even read. This issue deserves more discussion. I hesitate to bring up the other body, but I know they spent at least 2 hours in committee on this particular topic. There are questions regarding the constitutionality of this and how it relates to state and the national constitution. And there are other questions that I would like to dig deeper into. But, Mr. Chair, it's obvious that the party of speed wants to move quickly, and I can't stop you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you, Representative Torkelson, and I don't agree with a lot of the premise of that, and certainly this is not the end of a conversation, it's just the end of a committee hearing. There's ample opportunity to discuss the matter with the author offline, discuss with the members, to read and research. Nothing is being voted into law today. So the conversation continues. Chair Freiberg, do you have any brief closing comments?
Mr. Chair, point of information. When is the next presidential election? And do we have enough time for taking a day or two for another hearing or coming back tonight?
Representative Quam, there was a motion to table. The motion was defeated. We'll be proceeding to a vote today. The answer to your question is 2024. Chair Freiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I think a lot of the alleged concerns about this bill are being overstated. What it comes down to is that the person with the most votes gets elected president. I'm going to do something I haven't done very often in my closing remarks on bills. I'm going to quote Representative Quam. Minnesota's voice is in its vote. I agree. This makes every person in Minnesota's vote and voice count equally. You know, I thought the comparison to some of the smaller states was illustrative, and I would encourage members to vote yes.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you.
request a roll call.
Representative Torsten asked for a roll call. There will be a roll call. Chair Freiberg renews the motion that House File 642 be recommended to be placed on the general register. I'll ask Mr. Hermanson to take the roll.
Chair Freiberg.
Yes.
Vice Chair Greenman.
Final passage.
Aye.
Minority Leader Torkelson. Representative Agbaje.
Aye.
Representative Altendorf.
No.
Representative Bahner.
Aye.
Representative Bliss.
No.
Representative Coulter.
Aye.
Representative Davis.
No.
Representative Frederick.
Aye.
Representative Purcell.
Aye.
Representative Quam.
No.
Representative Stevenson.
Aye. There being 8 ayes and 5 nays, the motion prevails, and House File 642 is recommended to be placed on the general register. That's the end of our agenda. Chair Freiberg, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say.
I don't. Out of respect for members' time, I think we should just adjourn.
Then the meeting is adjourned.